Hey everyone, Beth Stelzer here with Save Women's Sports, and I have an awesome guest for you today, Miss Kara Dansky. Here she is on this side. She is the current president of the U.S. chapter of the Women's Human Rights Campaign. That is a huge deal. They're a growing organ. Would you say you're an organization at this point? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's a global organization and it has country chapters in many countries. And we're working to advance the Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights, which
And you
everyone
can
can find.
womensdeclaration.com, right? I'll link it below.
Yep.
Uh, and that's good. An incredible segment on sports to protect female sports. So we love y'all for that. She's done some incredible work with Wolf previously. And today I asked her if she would spare her time because she wrote a book. And it's so awesome, The Abolition of Sex, How the Transgender Agenda Harms Women and Girls. And it's just incredible to have seen you go on this journey and now have this incredible book comes out, which is documenting history, basically, that I think without you wouldn't be written down. And I think it's a great thing to have just in time for gifting. But a little bit of background with me and Kara. I saw Kara on Tucker Carlson a few years ago. I think that's how a lot of us have been introduced to Kara. She's always such a warrior on there. Uh, it inspired me to start speaking out and to use my voice. At first, I didn't use my real name after this whole powerlifting thing happened to me. And seeing her on there and other women really inspired me. Before I knew it, I was getting to meet her in DC, and not just meet her in DC, but at SCOTUS. We were at the Supreme Court at a rally for the Harris Bostock case. And we had transgender rights activists with megaphones screaming at us right in our faces. It was just this really intense thing, but also very bonding. And I felt really close to Kara after, and she was always been so kind to me. And we've just been warriors ever since. So enough rattling on. Kara, how you doing? How you been? How's it going?
It's going great, Beth, and thank you so much for having me. I do just want to say to your viewers that I spent last night at a Dave Chappelle event. Dave Chappelle came to DC and his documentary, which is called Untitled, showed at the Capitol Arena. It was exhausting. It was exhilarating. It was amazing. The phenomenal Erykah Badu was there and she performed a set. I didn't get out of there until midnight. Yeah, it was incredible. It was just
I think so many of us are jealous.
It was really incredible. But I didn't get out of there until midnight and I was so jazzed I couldn't get to bed until about 3 a.m. So if I'm not fully on my game, that's why. But nonetheless,
you're always firing at 100 or 110%, I think.
Super happy to be here.
So did he mention Team Turf or anything like that in this documentary? Did he go there?
No, he did not. So I'll just say a few things about the documentary since I brought it up. It's really lovely. And my understanding is that networks will not show it because there's an effort to cancel him because of the statements that he's made in support of J.K. Rowling and the statements that he's made about Team Turf. And so because there's an effort to cancel him, he decided to do a worldwide tour and show it at various arenas all around the world. I think it premiered in London and it's been in various places. And I just saw it here in DC. But if you can see it, please do, because
really neat. I had no idea about that.
Yeah, the answer to your question, Beth, is no. He didn't really go into that. But what it is it starts in early 2020, and he lives in a small town in Ohio. And part of the reason I wanted to watch it is because I am from a small town in Ohio, not the same town he lives in, but a different small town in Ohio. And he talks about the devastation of the pandemic in early 2020 on the town where he lives, especially on the small businesses that are there, the restaurants, the cafes, the stores. And, he talks about the devastation that the pandemic had on that small town. And then he talks a lot about George Floyd and the emotional devastation that had for so many of us in this country. And he decided to do something, which was hook up with a friend of his who had a pavilion in this large field in this town in Ohio and do a series of comedy shows. And he did. They did this thing, and they brought some incredible people to the show. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give any spoilers, but I learned last night that over the course of 2020, Trevor Noah was there, David Letterman was there. He just had Chris Rock was there. He had some incredible comedians fly in, and they go through the whole thing about how everyone had to be tested for COVID when they got there, and just how inspiring and elevating it was for that local community. And people came from all over to see the shows. And it's a really touching documentary about 2020, America, small town America 2020. So if you can see it, please go see it. But I know that's not what we're here to talk about.
Definitely. Well, everyone should go see it, I'm sure. I probably can relate. I'm in small town and in Minnesota where the whole Floyd thing went down. Yeah, great. Well, moving forward, the book. You have a great segment in here covering the couple of lawsuits. So there's a lawsuit where girls struck back in high school and then also in college. And a little shout out to me at Save Women's Sports for keeping track of bills. Just what kind of was your inspiration overall? Like what flipped Kara's switch to I should write a book?
So I was approached by the publisher, which is really flattering. He also had seen me on Tucker Carlson, which is kind of funny. He thought, he thought that there's a conversation that's not happening in America about what's really going on. And he thought that a lefty radical feminist might be a good person to tell the story about what's really happening in the US and the implications of enshrining words like gender identity and transgender into the law. And so one of the things I do in the book, which I don't think anyone else has done, is just straight up say, transgender isn't real. Somebody can have an identity if they want to, but every single human being on the face of the planet is either female or male, just like every other mammal. And nothing else is relevant to that. And if I and other feminists are going to be able to fight for the rights, privacy, and safety of women and girls, we have to be very clear about what the category women and girls is. And we are, and we do. And we're really happy to do that. And we're very happy to fight for the rights of those girls in Connecticut who sued their state athletic association, the right of the state of Idaho to protect women's sports at all levels of education, the right of, this is outside the sports realm, but I talk about a case in the book where a male professor at a public university had been publicly disciplined for refusing to use wrong sex pronouns. And we think that's wrong. This particular guy has a religious objection to using wrong sex pronouns, and that's not my issue. I'm not particularly interested in his religion. I don't share it, but nonetheless, he has a religious right and a free speech right not to use wrong sex pronouns in his classroom. And so when I was on the board of Women's Liberation Front, we were very excited to file a brief in support of that male professor for refusing to use wrong sex pronouns. So I weave a lot of things into the book. The introduction is a general introduction to the topic. Chapter 1 goes through how the US government is enshrining gender identity in the law at the legislative level, the administrative level, and the judicial level. Chapter 3.
I love how the introduction says, quote, observations of a TERF.
Yeah, one of the things that happens in the introduction is I say, look, the term TERF has been used as a pejorative insult to women. And I understand why. And a lot of women don't want to use it to describe themselves. But I do say, look, at this point, if fighting for the rights, privacy, and safety of women and girls makes me a TERF, that's fine. That's just fine. Like,
Glad to wear that badge of honor, right?
Right? I'm just going to keep fighting for the rights, privacy, and safety of women and girls. If you want to call me a TERF, call me a TERF. I don't care.
Speaking of getting called names, at this point in time, J.K. Rowling is going through some incredible stuff again here. People were posting her address online and now bringing up this whole debate again. It's really incredible to see. But as she put it, she's had enough death threats to paper her house. Have you received death threats? Have you gone through much of that?
Online, on social media, yes. I haven't received any personal death threats. I don't know if I will. It's so interesting, Beth, because there's so many issues where people can vehemently disagree, right? I might have a vehement disagreement with someone on the topic of abortion, right? There are people who want to put restrictions on women's right to abortion. I don't agree with that, but I've never had a person who disagrees with me on abortion threaten to kill me, right? Like, that just doesn't happen. I have friendships. I have political, professional, working relationships, and honest friendships with people who, specifically women, but men also, who disagree with me about abortion. No one's threatened to kill me over that issue.
Really good point.
People can reasonably disagree about a lot of things. Our political situation in the United States is very fraught. 2016, rough political year. 2020, rough political year. I've never voted for the previous guy who occupied the Oval Office, didn't vote for him in 2016, didn't vote for him in 2020. I know people who did, and I've had disagreements with those people. No one's threatened to kill me over it. But for some reason,
we've gotten into it a little bit in the past before even.
Yeah, we have, and we managed not to threaten to kill each other.
Somehow or another, huh?
But somehow
we had rational conversations.
Yeah. And we disagreed and we stayed friends, and that's fine. And for some reason, this issue has driven people over the edge of insanity. It's really crazy. It really is that bad. And people don't believe us. But thanks in part to your work, people are starting to see, because of the issue of sports and because of your work in exposing the men who are trying to get into women's sports because they can't make it in men's sports.
Well, unfortunately, sports is the one thing that most people can see. I wish they could see all the other rights that are threatened of women's, but sports are the tip of the iceberg. Most people can see, most people can relate. And I think most people don't even understand all that's going on with that and how we just basically have males marching onto the female teams. People are thinking there's like surgeries or waiting periods. And now the Olympics has basically erased all their qualifications and just passed the buck on to other organizations. So it's going to be up to them to protect females. So we have a long battle ahead. But look at all we've done. We're both the grassroots organizers, and we have done so much. Your briefs in these fights with prisons, sports, it encompasses so much. And I'm so glad to talk with you because we're all on kind of separate branches of the tree as I see it, but we're all rooted in this same thing of preserving what we can for women. And it's crazy that we have 50 years this summer is the anniversary of Title IX. We haven't even seen the equality from that. And now we've just basically, well, we haven't. Biden in his administration erased it with the insertion of gender identity. And he did that both on his first day of office and on International Women's Day. It's just crazy that we're in this boat, but I'm so thankful that we have people like you and people on the far other side. It's a hands across the aisle moment. And I think it's clear for people to see that now.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite things that someone said was Lear Keith during a talk at a library in DC when Madeline Kearns, a Scottish journalist who
Oh,
writes
she's
for
incredible.
yeah, she's phenomenal, and she writes for National Review, and she asked a question, and the question is, look, if the left can't fix this, can the right fix it? And Lear's response to that was, it's not going to be the left, it's not going to be the right, it's going to be women working together. And I love that. I just love that.
That's
And,
incredible.
you know, I haven't changed my politics. I am solidly on the left. I remain a registered Democrat. Um, and I have a lot of Republican women friends, and I'm very happy to work across the political aisle. And I hope we can keep doing that. One of the anecdotes I have in my book has to do with a conversation that I had with a group of Republican women. It's a Republican women's group from a fairly major city in the US. And they asked me, Kara, what are we going to do about the problem of transgender athletes in women's sports? And my response to that was, okay, I've got some ideas about that, but let's take a step back. And that step back is, what do you mean by transgender athletes? And the woman said, oh, I thought I had to say that. And I said, well, do you mean women and men and boys? And she said, yeah. And I said, okay, why don't you just say that? And she said, well, I didn't know if we were allowed to. And I thought that was so interesting, right? And so part of what I really want to do is empower everyone in this fight to use accurate language, use accurate and specific language. If you mean men and
pro-realist, right? Use some proper pronouns instead of preferred pronouns. That's how I like to say it.
yeah, use accurate pronouns. And also, if we use the language of our opposition, we've lost. We can't do it. We have to stop using the language of our opposition.
I think you have a really good point, because in that conflation of language is where some confusion ends up. And so we need to just be straight up. And we aren't cis women either. We don't need another label either. So we're talking about males competing in female sports, and that's as simple as it needs to be. And you don't have to, well, at least in America here anyway, we still have our rights to freedom of speech.
Yeah. Yeah, it's being stripped though. In New York, it's illegal to misgender someone.
Is it in California too?
That I don't know. I mean, California is one of the worst on this topic generally, but I don't know if there's a state law actually prohibiting misgendering. I do know that the district attorney of San Francisco has instituted a new policy mandating that all of his staff use preferred pronouns to describe defendants and witnesses and everyone in a criminal case, which could potentially mean, you have to understand what this could mean. It could mean a woman who has brought a rape charge could be required on a witness stand to refer to a male rapist as she. I mean, have we really thought through the implications of doing that?
Crazy world.
Yeah. I mean, so I was saying earlier, chapter one is, it asks the question, what is a woman? And so we go into that. Kind of astonishing that we have to talk about that, but apparently we do. Chapter 2 is going through all the legal implications of enshrining gender identity in the law. Chapter 3 is about more practical implications. So I talk, for example, about how the US is going to be able to record crime statistics if we're no longer able to distinguish between male people and female people. Right. Are we going to be able to talk about the epidemic of male violence against women if we're not allowed to distinguish between male people and female people? And then I go into some more detail about the implications for women's sports, women's prisons, women's domestic violence shelters, and I talk about pronouns. And then the next chapter is more about the silencing. And I talk about all of the women professors who have been disciplined or threatened with discipline for speaking out about this, women who aren't professors all over the world. There's a lawyer named Anna Kerr who runs something called the Feminist Legal Clinic. And her main job is to represent women who are domestic violence victims. And she also makes public statements about women's sex-based rights. And for that, she was punished by the city of Sydney, Australia. This goes on everywhere. And so I talk a little bit more about the silencing tactics in the media, on social media. I talk a little bit about all of the people who have been permanently banned from Twitter for this. And then chapter 5 is a conversation about what we can do about it. So in some ways, that's the most important chapter. No, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. Chapter 5 is about the industry that's pushing it. The industry that is throwing trillions of dollars into the push to abolish sex and instead enshrine gender identity throughout law and society. It's the conclusion.
To Jennifer Billick for laying a lot of that research out. I'm pretty sure you must give a credit to her in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it might sound complicated to everyone, but look at the book. It's really thin. Kara has laid it out really clear, and it's really easy to understand. There's a lot of legal stuff, but it's easy to understand, and it's so great to know the history and have it laid out there. And then her call to action at the end is pretty great. So I really hope y'all will pick up this book. It's available now on Amazon. I'll link it down below. It's been a long time coming, I think, Kara, and I hope there will be more in the future. Have you thought about that any? Is there any whispers maybe? I'm sure there's lots of plans in your... besides, tomorrow is Thanksgiving when we're recording today. It's one of my favorite holidays. I love to stuff myself.
Well, I mentioned during a book launch last week that I have tentatively begun exploring the possibility of running for city council in Washington, D.C., where I live. That's
nice.
Not definitely. I've only cautiously started exploring the possibility. And I really think I want more women to run for office. I really want more women to run for office. I hope some of you do.
Well, you are a great leader, Kara, and I'm really excited to see where that goes. Thanks for leaking that out. How fun. Yeah, and I'm sure you will inspire other people along the way. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining in with my lovely chat with Kara Dansky here. Make sure that you like and subscribe. It helps the channel out a whole lot. I'll link all her social media and where you can find the book below. Until next time, together we will save women's sports. Thanks, Kara. Bye, everyone.